and we get into Marvel Voices Legacy #1, celebrating the Black History Month with a star-studded lineup. This was fun. This isn't another one of those books that just like you get little snippets of characters that you didn't really know about, and also you get black writers writing these stories, and black artists writing or drawing these stories as well. And I really enjoyed it. I thought, there's a lot of like as expected stories in here, of just like finding confidence in your differences, and also there's a lot of real like life situations in this book. Like one of the stories deals with Nigeria and their police forcing right now, and how they're suppressing just human rights.
Right.
And it's prominent in one of the stories, and I think that's a great. I know a lot of people don't like that. I know the comic geek community hates that shit, where you start getting real life situations in your comic books, and you're like, just leave it alone. I want it. No, this is a perfect application for that, because not everyone watches the news, and not everyone consumes. They've got to be. I feel like you need to be exposed to these things in all forms of media, and I think this is a perfect form to do it in as well. And if that's not your jam, go listen to something else.
Well, and this argument's been brought up many times, but it's very cut and dry. Comics at their very core are political, and it's actually unquestionably not even up for debate. I mean, one of the most popular comics we have of all time, right, is Captain America punching Hitler in the face. That book was released before we were even in the war. So if that's not a political statement in a comic book, I don't know what is.
Yeah.
And so I think that, sometimes some of these stories are overt, and sometimes the stories are, not, I wouldn't say hidden, but just like seamlessly interwoven. And I think it's great that we have a book that just says, like, literally, this is a book by black authors and black talent, and that is good.
Yeah.
And it actually, like, regardless of whether, some of these stories didn't really even have, had this, a lot of them had to do with black identity, and some of them didn't. They were all good.
Yeah, like the Domino story, for instance, like that shit was heartstrings, like at first it just started off like pure action, and then you realize what she's doing, and you're like, oh, like
yeah,
that's rough, right? And I don't want to spoil it, because I encourage anybody and everybody that's picking up comics to go pick this up today, tomorrow, whenever you're at the shop, ask if they've got a copy of this. It's worth the read, because there's multiple stories in here, and then the last story in here is a story. I think is it a preview for the Def Jam stuff that's in Black Panther, or was it just something that was put at the end of the book?
So it is one of the 3 Def Jam highlights. So it says a 3-month short story special celebrating the voices of 3 rising Def Jam artists. So the first 2 that are released are in this book and the Black Panther book.
Okay. Well, that's the Storm story in this book is really good too. And, reading it also it reminds me of like what X-Men is like.
Yep.
If you don't realize what the X-Men story is at its root, then you really aren't understanding the material you were reading. Like, yes, it's great that there is a guy that can manipulate metal and take all the bullets out of your gun and then reverse it. That's great. Or there's a guy that can shoot ice out of his hands. Or there's a guy that's got wings. Or there's a lady that can read your mind. Yes, that's great. But deep down, it's about minorities being oppressed. And if you don't get that, I'm sorry.
And then there's no one that doesn't get it. If you pretend like you don't get that, you're being ignorant on purpose.
For sure.
So I think that honestly, like, all the stories were good, but I think the Domino story, for its intense reversal, I was reading it and I was like, man, this is badass. Like, this is just like a fun kick-ass story. And then you turn the page and you're like, oh yeah. Damn it. And then the Storm issue is just it's at one point an everyman X-Men story, and in another way, I think it's really important that that this story was told with Storm, but also like right now. Like I think it's fun that it fits with the message that Hickman is doing with Krakoa. Like it fits into a modern X-Men plotline.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, the Storm story was my favorite. Like all of them are really, all the stories were really good, but to me, Storm's story was probably the best. Like it just it had everything. Like you said, it's got continuity with the current X-Men story, and it told a classic X-Men story at the same time. And then it touched, it hit home with what we're currently dealing with right now in our society. So again, if you have not picked up this book or you were hesitant to pick up this book, I highly encourage it. It's just it's everything that comics are and should be.
Yep. And for the record, I think that the Miss Marvel, Shuri, Riri story was my favorite.
Oh yeah, that was pretty cool.